Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Josh from Business Review Webinars, and I will be your host. It is our pleasure to have Nucleus Network with us today, who will be presenting the webinar entitled 2022 Phase 1 Recruitment Outlook in Australia, Strategies for Recruitment Success in the COVID Normal Market. So a little bit about Nucleus Network. They are the world's only multi-site, multi-country Phase 1 trial specialist with units in both Australia and the USA. Over the past 17 plus years, they have conducted over 1,000 Phase 1 trials, and over 50% of their trials annually are true first-in-human. So your speakers today, we have Charlotte Hall, Chief Operating Officer, Mari Eriksson, Director of Marketing, and Brianna McDermott, Director of Project Management. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar platform on 24. You'll notice that this webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect for any reason, please just click on the link that you received via email to rejoin the session. In order to ask questions, you can send them in via the questions widget. Just type them into the box at the top right-hand corner of your screen and click submit. We've allocated some time at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts that you may have had. And also please use the yellow help widget if you require any assistance, and you can move, resize, and maximize any of the windows in front of you to get a better view of the slides. But for now, please allow me to welcome Charlotte.
Thank you for joining us in our presentation today. It's great to see that we have so many attendees from across about 20 countries. So I will just go through what we're going to cover today. Like most businesses globally, we've all been hit with the challenges during the pandemic. And specifically for us, it was the changing market for participant recruitment. As the world shut down and international and state borders closed, our prime population of trial participants diminished. In today's presentation, we will share our lessons learned on how we've adapted to a changed market and have continually reviewed our approach to clinical trial recruitment. We've achieved great successes in operating in an uncertain environment and rebuilding our monthly leads, but we've also not always got it right. We continue to optimize our recruitment processes and have spent considerable time analyzing the recruitment funnel. Focusing on conversions from lead to dosing, we'll take you through the strategy behind several initiatives that were implemented and how this contributes to the outlook of recruitment for Australia in 2022. We'll start today's presentation with Mari, our Director of Marketing, who will take you through how we have overcome attracting and educating new leads. Brianna, our Director of Project Management, will then take you through reducing barriers to entry for participants and our reward scheme. I will then rejoin at the end to take us through our system optimization strategy and our exciting expansions. So I will now pass over to Mari to kick us off with the first round.
Thank you, Charlotte. Hello and welcome to all of our viewers today. My name is Mari and I head the marketing at Nucleus Network. I'm very pleased to be presenting to you, sharing our insights, our learnings and our strategic initiatives that we have implemented here in Australia during the COVID pandemic. And we've done this to attract, educate and convert new participant leads. Look, undoubtedly participant markets around the world have been impacted by COVID-19, whether the impact has stemmed from the pause or cessation of trials, clinic closures due to outbreaks, high community infection, or more broadly, government orders. The healthy volunteer market has changed, some simply becoming less healthy with high local infection rates and a subset remaining unhealthy with the lingering effects of long-term COVID. In the graph, we can see Australia has had comparatively low infection rates per million people. The healthy volunteer market remains relatively healthy here. However, Australia has not been immune to unique participant recruitment challenges. Pre-COVID, our participant market was made up of three main areas. There was the younger university student 18 to 30-year-old market, and this included international students. Australia is a major exporter of higher education. There is also the older local 30 to 55-year-old healthy volunteer market. And to everyone listening in that bracket, we don't think you're old. It's just an older market. And then there's the international backpacker traveller market entering Australia on temporary visas. When the pandemic reached Australia in early 2020, our borders closed to international arrivals. This saw our traditional participant international backpacker and student markets decline dramatically. And prior to COVID, international arrivals were approximately 10 million per annum. In comparison, only 120,000 people arrived in the last 12 months. And I think a majority of those were really nationals returning home. So yes, There was significant initial disruption to participant recruitment, with our international markets largely leaving Australia, and as our borders continued to remain closed, we needed to pivot. And we pivoted swiftly, and we needed to respond to the changes in the market. So we decided to turn our attention to the domestic participant population, and we did this with what we like to call an always-on approach. Now, underpinning this always-on approach was increased and consistent engagement with our database. Within reasonable engagement parameters, we more than doubled our communications. We send approximately 500,000 SMS and 900,000 targeted emails per month. Now, that seems like a lot, but we have a database to manage this. And look, our open rate has been consistent at over 20%, while our unsubscribes are around about under 0.4%, so still relatively very low, despite the significant number of communications we're sending out. So at the moment, that really gives us the confidence that the database remains really healthy and engaged. In addition, we launched targeted and generic awareness campaigns to the local population. We needed to get our message out there, and we needed to get our message out there and cut through and resonate with the local market, prompting them to register for our clinical trials. The campaigns that we produced and we continue to produce were multimedia and included several touch points, as you can see on the screen. This was done through digital, social media, above-the-line marketing campaigns such as billboards and radio, and paid and organic channels such as news media. As I mentioned, we gained significant coverage of our COVID vaccine trials. Through these, we were able to really educate the community by a very relatable topic, using media and journalists as our advocates. So when we look at lead attribution, about 75 to 80% of our leads per month can be attributed to existing leads. And they are people who have been in our database for more than a month, so about a month to several years, and who have received multiple communications from us, compared to new leads, which make up around about 25%. And like in any business, require more time and effort to convert. While we deployed this increased marketing activity, our data trends were sadly indicating that the domestic market were less committed and our conversions across the participant funnel were decreasing. COVID created hesitancy, like around the world. COVID created hesitancy within the population, with many participants really becoming less willing to be confined in an inpatient healthcare setting. And unlike the backpacker market, we really found that the domestic population also had more influences in their day-to-day lives. And this is in the way of family and friends who held fears for their loved ones in participating, whereas backpackers are generally more removed and open to new experiences when travelling. So across the participant funnel, we identified 4 key drop-off points, and we undertook market research with approximately 200 recent participants who had left the funnel. We needed to gain a better understanding of why they dropped out, whether it be not booking or not answering a scheduled phone screening call in drop-off points 1 and 2, or not responding to reminders, or not attending their medical screening appointment at the clinic, drop-off points 3 and 4. Our goal was to use research data to launch initiatives to increase conversions at each point, in essence, maximise our lead conversion. Both quantitative and qualitative questions were used, including asking respondents open-ended questions on how we could actually improve our service. So what did the research tell us? Key findings from the research were clear. This market wanted more educational content on each stage of the recruitment journey, from online registration to phone screening, consent, medical screening, and what life was like on a trial in the clinic. They also wanted more information on the safety of clinical trials and a high-touch approach with increased check-in points along the funnel. And interestingly, year on year, it was evident that the top 3 motivators remain the same, and you can see this in the bottom right of the screen. Reimbursement is still our highest motivator for participation. Trials take time. Participants rearrange work, their lives to attend screening, the inpatient stay and outpatient visits. So understandably, they should be reimbursed for their time. Altruism also remained a key motivator. Our participants want to contribute to medical research. Curiosity, people will have seen our advertising, heard about clinical trials from family and friends, or have seen media stories. And the research confirmed a new motivation, being people in the community wanting to play an active role in the development of COVID vaccines and treatments. We took the research on board and produced a suite of new educational assets for participants. A new video and fun animation to walk the participants through the recruitment process and what life is like on the study in the clinic. Many people are unsure of what a clinical trial facility environment is like. The video in particular aimed to debunk myths through clear visuals showing the clinic setting, staff, participants relaxing in their beds, socialising with other participants, playing games or streaming their latest series. A safety facts and stats animation was also created to communicate our safety steps, strong track record and location within reputable medical precincts. These new educational assets were further supported by a library of fact sheets explaining medical procedures required in some studies, and these were communicated with our participant markets through core channels that we use, whether online, through social media, Facebook, Instagram and YouTube, and we also embedded them in our email communications across each point in the funnel. So notably, our new participant video, just in the bottom left corner of the screen, has already achieved over 9,000 views in 5 months with very high engagement stats. So on average, a view duration of 77% of video completion and a 95% social like ratio. This indicates to us that the video is resonating very well with viewers and is contributing to a more informed and more committed participant pool entering the recruitment funnel. So how did these strategic initiatives support lead generation? As you can see, in the second quarter of 2020, there's no denying we experienced a rocky period at the start of the pandemic. The August spike was a welcome lift. This related to our announcement of Nucleus delivering Australia's first COVID vaccine trial, where we received major media attention globally. The new always-on approach of increased communications and advertising, plus our new educational assets, started to make an impact and resulted in stabilised lead generation of around about 10,000 pre-qualified leads per month. And to break that down, pre-qualified refers to leads that have already completed a 10 to 15-part screening questionnaire before they enter the phone screening stage with our in-house recruitment contact centre. In the graph on the right, you can see in 2020, the new first-time participants refreshed the participant pool, and this is reflected in the significantly higher first-time dosing rate recorded. However, in the past 12 months, the percentage of first-time participants has actually decreased from about 80% to 69%, as we see an increasing number of these first-timers from 2020 return for multiple trials. So we do expect this trend to continue toward repeat participants coming back for more trials. However, they will be impacted by washout periods. Depending on the study protocol, participants are practically limited to around about 2 to 3 dosing times per year. So to recap, we have stabilised lead generation to approximately 10,000 leads per month. New education assets have supported a decrease in cancellations and an increase in clinic arrival rates, which have resulted in more committed participants and an increased lead to dose conversion. Now, before I hand you over to my colleague Brianna McDermott, I wanted to thank you for your time and highlight that while I have touched on the importance of participant market research, client and industry research is equally as important. So please complete the survey. It's short and will take you less than a minute. Your input can help us understand what information is helpful to you in planning your next trial and any key concerns for 2020. And now over to our Director of Project Management, Brianna McDermott.
Thank you, Mari, and hello to our attendees today. Following on from the introduction, my name is Brianna McDermott, and I am the Director of Project Management here at Nucleus Network. So I'll be taking us through part 2, where we looked at the potential barriers to entry for participation of our healthy volunteer population. And this part of our approach, like all of the parts that are being presented here today, involved a strategic set of pivots that were deployed at different points of the participant journey. And really this was to reduce any barriers to entry that may have been impeding on successful program outcomes. So Mari has touched on how we focused on attracting new leads from new markets and engaging our database. I will be touching on next the increased reimbursement rates and review and revision of protocols and how that impacted the overall outcome of projects. So firstly, we carefully examined our participant reimbursement models. Following on from the market research that we have conducted that Mari has spoken about already, and that will continue to be spoken about and referenced throughout this presentation, there really was a strong response to align our reimbursement modelling to the current economic climate. And from this insight, we were able to overlay the market trends for healthy volunteer reimbursement to our own reimbursement model and identify the changes that we could make, which would not only be competitive in the market, but to also meet the needs of the participants. This process of looking at our remuneration model and making adjustments to participant reimbursements was done with the independent review of the Ethics Committee and of course approved prior to implementation. Overall, you can see on the graph on the right-hand side here that it shows a definite and positive uplift in the arrival rates of participants from their initial phone screening and booking. So this means that a participant has been successfully phone screened and arrived for their booking in the clinic as scheduled. And we know that arrival rates are another key indicator of participant engagement and, I suppose, their commitment to the process of healthy volunteer participation. And really what we can see is that it directly attributed to those programs where the reimbursement model was adjusted. This approach that we took to achieve this outcome was to develop a sliding scale of reimbursement. And essentially what that means is that we based it on the number of inpatient nights, so the confinement nights when they're in the unit, their outpatient visits or their ongoing commitment to come back to the unit for follow-up, safety and medical review, and the overall duration of the study. So as we know, we only reimburse for a participant's time commitment and not other variables such as a complexity of a program. So this sliding scale really helped us to build longer lasting commitments from our participant pool. And despite the initial market data indicating that remuneration was a primary reason for participation, the positive uptick in arrival rates that we have seen has indeed been much higher than we had originally anticipated, which of course is a fantastic outcome. And it really proved our hypothesis from the market research that by focusing on an appropriate remuneration model that matched what was of the participant market at that time, we would see an increase in overall participation. So those numbers that I'm referring to there, the preliminary data that we have collected indicates that those studies that we looked at that time with the increased reimbursement rate applied are currently experiencing up to 27% increase in screening appointment attendance. So overall, for the quarter of Q2 to Q3 2021, the arrival rate increase has been 41%. And we continue to review the remuneration model. This is an ongoing process and hasn't just been done for the previous quarter, but is something that we will continue to do and is a key learning from the last 2 years of the pandemic. Now, secondly, we carefully examined each of our protocols and their alignment towards successful participant recruitment. We know, and it goes without saying, that a well-designed study, a well-written protocol can have significant impact on the many important outcomes of any clinical trial in any phase. And one of those is being successful recruitment. At Nucleus Network, our goal really is to work alongside our sponsors and their CRO partners to ensure the scientific integrity of the protocol is maintained, while also reflecting the dynamic nature of the participant market. And again, that was a key learning for us, that the way in which participants behave in the market, their health profiles, they're not static in time and they change because we know that people's behaviours change as well. So as we headed into the second year of the pandemic in Australia in 2021, we really had come to understand that the behaviours, lifestyle factors, and indeed what we were calling health trends of participants had changed because their personal environments were changing. And the general assessment was that protocols were drafted mostly based on a non-COVID time. So with the stabilised lead pool that my colleague Mari had discussed earlier, we needed to look into ways that we could best optimise the leads we already had and see where our gaps were between the participants' health profiles during this time and our current protocol inclusion-exclusion criteria. Now, our approach to this scenario was to pull all of our pre-screening, phone screening and medical screening data, so it was a lot of participant-based data, to identify key trends in exclusions that could help us to pinpoint the changes in these health profiles. So what were the key areas that were sort of impacting exclusions and perhaps impacting our conversion rates that with tweaks would actually see an improvement? So again, as you can see from the graph on the right-hand side here, we were able to pull out trends that were increasing in the community throughout the lockdown period and increasing our exclusions. So some of the most common ones, which you might not be surprised about, included smoking frequency, high BMIs, medical and mental health conditions, prescription medication use, and depression. Now, of course, there were other exclusions that were coming through during this period, but we identified these as the key exclusions. So through ongoing collaboration with our sponsors and their CRO partners, we were able to meticulously go through each protocol with the corresponding principal investigator and the sponsor's medical team to identify potential adjustments to the criteria that may have been impacted by these trends. And one of the most common ones was BMI. As an extension of the protocol review, the new lead generation questionnaires were also updated to more clearly delineate between self and professional diagnosed health conditions, which have also been impacted by the pandemic. So an example of this included most commonly mental health or other medical related diagnoses where participants were actually self-excluding without first speaking with a trained medical professional. So we wanted to capture those participants and give them the opportunity to speak through some of their symptoms or what they're experiencing at that period of time with a medical professional. We can absolutely see that this approach is proving successful through those downward trending lines there. And to date, from Q2 to Q3 in 2021, we have seen a 17% increase in booking volume, which means we're excluding less people over the phones, whilst our overall monthly medical screening percentage has remained stable, which is fantastic. So these ongoing reviews form an essential part of our project management planning process in the PM department. And I say this all the time, this is really a dynamic process conducted on a monthly basis and includes securing early feedback from our clinical development department and closely monitoring changing environmental factors such as the more recent vaccination rollouts here in Australia, seasonal changes such as the upcoming Christmas period, and other community-related changes, because we know that people's health profiles, again, aren't static in time. So just touching on the vaccination rollouts, because we think it's an important point to make, particularly here in Australia. So in Australia, 90% of the adult population is on track to be fully vaccinated, which means 2 vaccinations, which really is a result of the federal government mandates. So these mandates include retail, hospitality, workplaces, where an individual within the community cannot enter those premises without providing that evidence. So it really has strengthened our vaccination rollout and vaccination uptick in Australia. So whilst this is fantastic news for the Australian people, it does mean that we've had to take a closer look at protocols to again make sure that what is keeping Australians safe is of course not self-excluding participants in certain protocols either. And again, we worked with our Chief Medical Officer, we worked with sponsors, their CRO partners, to making sure that we were keeping participants safe on study, not removing any scientific integrity from the protocols, but not reducing the potential for successful recruitment on programs. So coming back to our initiatives and to recap, Mari has taken us through how we attract and educate new leads, and we've now discussed how we look to reduce barriers to entry with more positive gains. And this is seen as the 27% increase in screening appointment attendance, demonstrating that really great engagement and commitment to the overall process of participating as a healthy volunteer, and a 17% increase in booking volume, which again indicates greater alignment between protocols and participant suitability. So let's take a look at what's next. Now we're going to touch on the reward and retaining local participants. From here, we'll shift our focus onto how we examined the reward and retaining component, because ultimately they are and will be our best advocates for future participation. So optimizing the leads also goes beyond the numerical component of increasing conversions. You know, we can see with lead generation, it cannot be a lot about the numbers. But when it comes to healthy volunteer participation, we know a lot of it is about the person and engaging them. And this, of course, would be the same in any business. It goes without saying that your repeat customer can be your most valuable asset. So, of course, in clinical trials, there is a ceiling on how many times they're able to participate, depending on certain protocols. But their engagement, and more importantly, their third-hand engagement, so that's with their friends, their family, this is so incredibly powerful in terms of building awareness and our database with future participants. And really, our approach was to build our database organically, because we knew that that was going to give us the best return on our engagement efforts and all of the fantastic campaigns that Mari and her team do. And so one of the ways in which we did this was through our Refer a Friend program, where the individual would be given a monetary payment for referring someone known to them for a screening visit. And I mean, it's quite obvious here from the graph that it's had a huge impact, with the number of participants repeating, increasing 75% year on year to date. This trend toward repeat users is expected to continue as our database continues to grow and we remain consistent in our education and engagement of current and new participants. So we're really excited to see where this leads. But ultimately, this approach has been a valuable source of new leads, increasing referrals from less than 7% in March to 12% in July. And that continues to slowly creep up as well in Q3 of 2021. All right, so back to our initiatives again and checking in. We've now stepped through our first three, touching on our loyalty program and its benefit in increasing referrals and therefore our database organically, as we say, the best way. And this now takes us into our fourth initiative, nurturing and optimizing leads, which will be presented by my colleague Charlotte on the next slide. So I'll hand over to Charlotte. Thanks, Bree, for that. So next we'll move on to how we've nurtured and optimized our leads. So we've invested significantly in technology stack solutions through customization of our recruitment tools, such as Salesforce and cloud-based telephony platforms. We have good visibility around key metrics which drive our performance. So we have end-to-end participant analytics, which provides us with real-time performance feedback, which is focused around the conversion from leads to dosing. So by this, we mean that we have visibility on our arrival rates, our cancellation rates, reasons for exclusions with the medical team, and ultimately how people move through the funnel and ultimately come through to dosing. So from feedback from the participant survey that we mentioned earlier, we found that whilst we have a booking system that's really effective, if the participants missed the call, they didn't bother to return it. So this was pretty disappointing to realise this, because they've gone through the effort to complete the registration form, book in and speak to us, yet we weren't actually able to get hold of them. So one of the introductions has been around an integrated autodialer. So this supports our recruitment team to capture additional call attempts in quick succession. So when the participant has booked in, and if they have a window of between 12 and 1, if we miss them at 12 o'clock, we may have then moved through a queue and gone to somebody else. So by having the functionality of the autodialer, that's doing a lot of the work for us, and we can essentially do a few calls in succession, which ultimately has meant that we've been able to get hold of the participants on a second call, and that's been a great engagement. Other small changes that we've implemented are around our IVS controls on our inbound calls. So when participants are calling, they've got options, and that really streamlines the calls so that we can reach the intended respondent first time rather than having to go through one or two different connections. We've also examined the way that we've engaged with our participants leading up to the studies and have made small but significant improvements in the personalised contact by our participant success team. So this team really offer that VIP service where they're following up with calls and having that extra engagement leading up to screening appointments where we can really put them at ease if they have any questions coming into the study. So something like you would expect from a concierge when you check into a hotel, they're checking in, making sure that everything's on track for your travel. So we've had great feedback on this service, and certainly has been able to put participants' minds at ease, particularly when they're a first timer coming into a trial. And lastly, as protocols have become more complex, so do the procedures that participants are asked to undergo. So therefore, with the approval of the HREC committees, we created dedicated fact sheets that explain in more detail than what the informed consent form would have done, procedures that they're going to be undergoing, such as biopsies, bronchoscopies or lumbar punctures, have all been created, and again, have had great feedback from participants that they felt extra supported in knowing what these particular procedures were going to be as they enter onto trials. So as we could see from the other side as well, we've optimized our systems, and that's really provided us with great increases in our metrics of our call capacity. So approximately 10 to 11% increase in our inbound and outbound call capacity, meaning that we're able to reach more participants quicker, and we're able to reduce that gap in between calls. And this has also then resulted into a reduction of about 8% in our cancellation rates. And as Brianna has mentioned previously, that was a 27% arrival rate as well to attendance of our clinic. And now we're going to take a look at our expansion. You may have seen in recent announcements on LinkedIn about our exciting site expansion. As a strategy to bring clinical trials to regional areas and expand the recruitment pool, Nucleus Network has introduced a satellite site model. Participation in a clinical trial is quite time-consuming, and one of the insights we've had from our research is that people are prepared to travel to participate in a trial, but they don't want to travel to realise that they are not suitable. The model enables screening activity to occur at a local satellite site, so once they are eligible, they're only required to travel to the clinical trial facility for dosing and any relevant confinement periods. They will then have their follow-up visits performed locally again at the satellite site. By creating satellite clinics in regional and out-of-city areas, we're broadening the access to clinical trials and making participation a lot more convenient. We've officially opened our first site in Geelong, which is approximately 75 kilometres away from our principal Melbourne clinic in Victoria, and we've seen great engagement from the local community. An additional site is planned in Q1 next year for our Queensland facility, with potentially more sites to follow. So now we'll take a look at how the initiatives have impacted our performance. So we're a business built on metrics, and our performance is continually being assessed. You can see here on the slide the significant improvements made since introducing the initiatives we've mentioned between Q2 and Q3. Analysis of lead conversion through the full funnel has improved across all participant drop-off points, which has led to a 45% increase in our lead to dosing conversions. Our take home has been that it's not always about the volume of leads, it is how they are converting through the funnel. As we come to the end of our presentation and open up to questions, I want to share our approach leading into 22 and beyond. Globally, phase 1 sites continue to be challenged by the pandemic and the ability to conduct trials in line with a pre-COVID world. Often the first question we receive from clients is around bed availability and Australia's capacity to recruit. With the pandemic ongoing, we realise it is no longer just about bed availability. It is not in anyone's interest to be accepting studies into beds if the population doesn't support it. We've undergone deep analysis of our conversions and bed utilisations and have moved to a multi-view approach when it comes to scheduling trials. Not only does there need to be unit availability, we need to consider the market, how the leads are behaving, and ultimately how the leads are converting into those participants. We've built a robust model. Noting everything that's been shared today, we have much better visibility and have confidence in scheduling studies to what the market will deliver at the time. To round out our presentation today, the COVID environment remains unpredictable, and it has been as it has for the last 18 months. However, Nucleus has the people, systems and processes in place to enable it to pivot if necessary and continue to deliver trials even as the pandemic continues. Our new cohesive recruitment approach is underpinned by extensive participant data analysis and is resulting in positive outcomes. The work done today is not a set and forget exercise. It is embedded in our daily practices and will be ongoing. Because what we do today won't necessarily work tomorrow, so it is important we remain agile in our approach. We have stable lead to booking to dosing metrics which align to our dosing capability from the current market and is assisting us in scheduling and delivering on programs. There continues to be good capacity to conduct clinical trials in Australia, and despite our current border closures, has the population pool to support the demand. The reopening of international borders was not contingent in any of our analysis, but will enable further upside to participant recruitment as we start to enter into a COVID normal world. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time and joining today, and I'm now going to hand over to Josh, who will open up our Q&A.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, and thank you for the presentation. Just a reminder to the audience, if you want to ask a question, just type it into the Q&A box on the top right of your screen and hit submit. But we've had a few come in already. The first one here is asking, I have quite specific needs in my protocol. How will this be managed?
I think I'll take that one. So when our business development team first engage with our sponsors and CRO partners in the very early stages, we commence a detailed review of the protocol and provide what we would consider customised feedback on how we could work together to ensure the success of the program. So our Chief Medical Officer and experienced principal investigator team, along with the expertise in different functional areas, also add their input across the review process to making sure that it is as robust as possible prior to the ethics committee submission, but also that it is fit for purpose for what the sponsor is trying to achieve from that program. It meets the needs of or I should say it balances what's happening in the participant market at that time. And of course, we're providing the best solution that we possibly can. So each customer relationship, like in any business, is unique, and we treat it as such. And we know that the requirements and outcomes on protocols are also just as unique. And that is why we really believe at Nucleus Network in providing a customised approach. So even if you think that you have the most specific and nuanced protocol, we will work with you in making sure that we can deliver it successfully. So I'll head back to you, Josh, if there's another question for the panel.
Yep, we've got another one here. You said the borders are open. How long until you expect leads to start to increase again?
I think that's a good one for me, Josh, and that's a really good question. As you can imagine, we're all really excited about the news of the borders opening, and we are counting down the hours until December 1st. So look, we'll be taking a really conservative approach on this. Of course, right now, the Northern Hemisphere is heading into winter, and very sadly, some countries are heading into some fourth waves. But here in Australia, look, we're heading into summer. So with the borders opening, I gather we may experience an influx of vaccinated tourists wanting to escape the Northern Hemisphere winter, and we'll be monitoring this really closely. And look, likewise, with the borders opening, our international student market will start to return. Our school year is January to December in the Southern Hemisphere. So, that will start in January, February. And again, we'll be keeping a very close eye on the immigration arrival numbers. We work very closely with the data. So we look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics data, and that's out each month. So we'll be looking at the short-term and long-term international arrival numbers and analyse this along with our new lead generation, just to look at the new leads coming into the business and see if there's any trends and uplifts for the international market. As a marketing department, we work very closely with our Breeze department and the other departments within Nucleus just to discuss any market trends that we're seeing, so they can communicate them externally with our sponsors and CROs and make sure that we are giving the right information of how different trials and participant markets are reacting.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got another one here asking, can you do special advertising for my study?
Absolutely. I think that's another one for me as the head of marketing. We run both targeted and generic advertising, as I mentioned in the presentation. And we run this so we can maximise lead generation from the current market with our always-on approach. So for special populations, we research the best channels to reach these markets, and we ensure a multi-touch approach, whether this be digital, social media, above-the-line marketing. For example, some special populations we may reach more so in pharmacies. So we look at pharmacy LCD screens, digital screens, and wherever possible, we partner with associations. So each protocol is different, and what we do is we want to reach all of our potential participants in the place where they're getting their information.
I heard Australia is at capacity. How are you dealing with this?
I can have a go at that one. It's a really good question because it is commentary that's come through a number of different channels over the last 2 years. And there's no doubt that shortly after the announcement of the pandemic, the pipeline of work that was coming into Australia in the phase 1 space, it was incredibly strong. And so there was a perception that with that pipeline being that strong, that we would hit a saturation point when it came to our, or just generally phase 1's ability to continue delivering in the pandemic. And there was a point at which, like the rest of the world, operations did start to slow down. But speaking from Nucleus Network's point of view, we take a very different position. We very much look at what protocols are coming through our pipeline and what is the market allowing us to deliver. So we really only look at those opportunities that we know that we have confidence and a level of comfort that we can actually deliver. So it's not about bed capacity for us. We have lots of bed capacity, having sites both in Victoria and Brisbane. But for us, it's more around the participant market and what they can deliver for us in terms of recruitment and eventually dosing. So we very much focus on our ability and our capacity to dose as opposed to beds. So very much from Nucleus's point of view, we have lots of capacity in beds. And as Mari said, with borders opening, that our capacity to dose more participants will only continue to grow. So we don't anticipate there being any sort of ceilings or constraints from that point of view.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. We've got another one here asking, what are the expected timelines for a new study?
I can probably take that one as well. So from the beginning of our first interactions with the protocol and, of course, with the sponsor group, we will discuss timelines and how this will work in line with the proposed ethics submission dates and other corporate milestones that the sponsor and or the CRO partner may have together. And so once these details are ironed out, we will then work with you to book in the appropriate beds or slots to ensure that these are locked away from the very beginning. So the booking part is done very early on, and that does secure your timelines. And timelines on any program are incredibly important, and we're obviously acutely aware of that. So they are reviewed throughout the life of the program. And in the event of, say, things like IP delays or perhaps safety signals that warrant changing the timelines, what we would do, or what our approach would be, is to utilise the future beds that you've already got locked away and booked to pick up a revised schedule. And what this does is it minimises downstream impacts as much as possible, whilst also trying to help us, not extend timelines if there are external factors that have caused that. So the overall timelines of any project, of course, is dependent on the study design and the required outcomes. And again, right back at the very beginning, we work with you to understand all of these and schedule them into our unit and secure the availability at the very start.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've got time for one more question. Do you have any other plans for new clinics?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one. Yes, so as we've mentioned, we've opened up satellite sites. We are going to be opening up further satellite sites in Queensland. And as the market changes going into 2022, there's opportunity for additional sites that we might put on in other areas surrounding those clinics. But more broadly, we do have a business in the US, in Minnesota, and we're certainly going to be looking to have a larger footprint in the US and potentially, who knows, on the cards for other countries as well. So watch this space.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So that just leaves me to thank Charlotte, Mari and Brianna for what was a great presentation, to Nucleus Network for sponsoring this session. Also, to the attendees, there will be a short survey at the end of this presentation, which I'm sure you guys at Nucleus Network would be very appreciative if you filled out. You will also receive an email shortly telling you how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar, or you can access this through our website, which is www.pmi-live.com. We look forward to sharing further webinars with you, so please do keep an eye out on the website we just mentioned. But once again, thank you for everyone who turned up and watched today, and we hope you'll have a fantastic rest of your day.